Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Feld had exactly 90 seconds before the most important briefing of his career, and the last thing he needed was an unfamiliar woman sitting quietly in the corner of his secure briefing room. "Ma'am, this room is restricted to cleared personnel only," he said, stepping toward her. "I'm going to need you to step outside." She didn't move. She didn't even look up from the folder in her lap. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. 3 other officers in the room exchanged glances, silently backing him up. Nobody recognized her. Nobody had cleared her. As far as any of them knew, she'd simply wandered into the most classified room on the entire base. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again," Feld said, his patience thinning. That's when the door opened, and Colonel Whitaker, the man everyone in that room answered to, walked in, glanced at the tension in the room, and said the one sentence that changed everything. "Stand down, Colonel. She outranks all of you." The room went dead silent. Stick around, because what happens over the next 20 minutes of this briefing is one of the most satisfying reversals we've ever covered on this channel. And if you love stories about the quietest person in the room turning out to be the most powerful one, hit subscribe right now, because we've got a brand new one just like it every single week. Major General Renata Cole had spent the better part of her career being underestimated, and somewhere along the way, she'd stopped minding it. She was 54 years old, soft-spoken almost to a fault, and built a reputation not through volume or presence, but through an almost unnerving stillness, the kind of calm that came from 3 decades of making decisions that actually mattered, in rooms far more dangerous than briefing rooms. She'd commanded joint operations across 2 continents, advised 4-star generals on decisions that shaped entire deployments, and somewhere along the way had simply stopped feeling the need to announce any of it. Today, she'd arrived early to a classified strategic briefing regarding a joint operation between 3 separate commands, an operation she herself had spent the last 4 months quietly overseeing from a level most of the officers in that room didn't even know existed. She'd walked in wearing a plain uniform jacket, with her rank insignia obscured by a folder tucked under her arm, chosen a seat in the back corner, and said nothing while she waited for the room to fill. She wanted to watch, the way she often did before major briefings, how a room of officers behaved when they believed no one of consequence was paying attention. What she got instead was Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Feld, 90 seconds before the briefing, deciding she didn't belong there at all. Marcus Feld had run this briefing room for 3 years, and in that time, he'd developed a rigid, almost obsessive sense of who was supposed to be where. Every seat had a name attached to it in his head before anyone even sat down. An unfamiliar face in an unassigned seat, this close to a classified briefing, wasn't just unusual, it was a security concern he took personally. "Ma'am, I need you to identify yourself," he said, stepping closer. "This briefing requires a specific clearance level, and I don't have your name on today's roster." "I understand the concern," she said calmly, still not looking up. "You're doing exactly what you should be doing. Then you understand why I need you to step outside until we can verify your clearance." "I'd rather not," she said simply. "I have somewhere to be in about 90 seconds, and it happens to be this exact room." That answer did nothing to soften his stance. If anything, her calm only heightened his suspicion. Most people who genuinely didn't belong somewhere either got flustered or tried to talk their way past him with excessive detail. She did neither. She simply sat there, patient, unbothered, letting him work through his own procedure without any resistance at all. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't recognize you, and I can't allow unverified personnel into a classified briefing. I'm going to need you to come with me." 2 other officers in the room, sensing the tension, moved subtly to reinforce his position, not aggressively, but with the unmistakable body language of people backing up their commanding officer in a moment they assumed he had fully under control. "Colonel," she said, finally looking up at him, "I'd genuinely recommend you let this go. Not because I outrank you, although I do, but because in about 30 seconds, someone is going to walk through that door who's going to make this conversation a lot more uncomfortable for you than it needs to be." He almost laughed. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand the seriousness of—" The door opened. Colonel Whitaker stepped inside, taking the scene in half a second, Feld standing over a woman who clearly had no intention of moving, two officers flanking him, and a room full of people who had no idea what was actually happening. "Feld, what's going on here?" "Sir, this woman doesn't have clearance for this briefing, and she's refusing to—" "Stand down, Colonel," Whitaker said, his voice suddenly sharp enough to cut through the entire room. "She outranks all of you." If you love the exact moment a room full of confidence collapses into silence, you're going to enjoy the rest of this story even more. But first, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because we tell stories exactly like this one every single week. The silence that followed lasted almost 10 full seconds, an eternity in a room full of officers trained to react instantly to almost everything. Marcus Feld turned slowly back toward the woman in the corner, his mind racing to reconcile what he'd just heard with the plain jacket and quiet demeanor he'd spent the last 2 minutes trying to remove from his briefing room. "Ma'am, he started, then stopped, unsure how to finish a sentence that had no good ending. "General Cole," Whitaker said, walking further into the room. "My apologies for the confusion. I should have flagged your attendance to the room beforehand." "No apology necessary," she said, finally standing, revealing the insignia that had been folded beneath her jacket the entire time. "I asked you not to. I wanted to see how the room handled an unfamiliar face under pressure before the briefing started." Feld felt his stomach drop somewhere near the floor. "You wanted to test us," he said quietly. "I wanted to observe you," she corrected. "There's a difference. A test implies I was hoping you'd fail. I wasn't. I was hoping to see exactly what I saw. An officer who took security seriously enough to challenge someone he didn't recognize, even when she gave him every reason to back down easily. I threatened to remove a 2-star general from a briefing room." "You threatened to remove an unidentified individual from a restricted briefing room," she said. "That's not a mistake, Colonel. That's the job working exactly the way it's supposed to." He exhaled slowly, some of the color returning to his face. "I appreciate you saying that, ma'am, but I still feel like I need to apologize." "You don't," she said. "But if it makes you feel better, you can buy me a coffee after this briefing and tell me exactly what you were thinking the moment that door opened." A few muffled laughs broke the tension across the room. The briefing itself proceeded exactly as planned, though every officer in that room now sat noticeably straighter than they had 10 minutes earlier. General Cole's presence, once revealed, changed the entire tone of the discussion, not because she dominated the conversation, but because of how carefully everyone else suddenly chose their words, aware that the quiet woman in the back corner had spent 4 months overseeing the very operation they were discussing. Afterward, as the room slowly emptied, Marcus Feld lingered near the door, waiting for a moment to speak with her privately. "General, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why do you do that? Sit in unfamiliar rooms without announcing who you are?" She considered the question seriously before answering. "Because the moment people know exactly who I am, they stop showing me who they actually are," she said. "I don't get to see how an officer handles genuine uncertainty if he already knows the outcome is going to embarrass him. I saw exactly what I needed to see from you today, Colonel. Someone who takes security seriously enough to challenge a stranger, even when every signal told you to back down." It didn't feel like a compliment in the moment. "Most useful lessons don't," she said. "But I promise you, the version of this story where you waved me through without asking a single question would have concerned me far more than the version where you nearly had me escorted out." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. "For what it's worth, ma'am, I won't forget this." "I wouldn't expect you to," she said, a faint smile crossing her face as she gathered her things. Nobody ever does. Word of the briefing room incident spread through the base with predictable speed, though General Cole made no effort to either confirm or deny most of the increasingly exaggerated versions that circulated over the following weeks. Marcus Feld, to his credit, didn't try to bury the story or explain it away. When his own subordinates asked him about it directly, he told it exactly as it happened, including the parts where he came dangerously close to escorting a 2-star general out of a classified briefing. "Worst 90 seconds of my career," he admitted more than once. And somehow also one of the most important. Something shifted in him after that day, though not in the way most people expected. He didn't become more cautious or more hesitant to challenge unfamiliar faces. If anything, General Cole's approval of his instincts made him more confident in exactly that instinct. What changed was how he carried himself afterward, less rattled by uncertainty, more willing to trust that doing the job correctly mattered more than avoiding an awkward moment with someone senior. 6 months later, when a quiet, unassuming visitor showed up to another classified briefing without an obvious escort, Feld stopped her exactly the way he'd stopped General Cole. Calm, direct, unwilling to simply assume she belonged there without verification. She turned out to be a visiting attaché from an allied nation, exactly where she was supposed to be. But when someone later asked Feld if he regretted challenging her, he simply shook his head. "I learned that lesson already," he said. "You ask the questions, every time. Doesn't matter who ends up standing in front of you." General Cole, for her part, made a point of requesting Feld's briefing room specifically for future joint operations, not because the incident amused her, though it clearly did, but because she'd found exactly what she was looking for that day: an officer who did his job correctly, even when doing it correctly meant standing his ground against someone who could have made his life very difficult. Here's a question for you. If you were in Colonel Feld's position, and the person you nearly had removed from the room turned out to outrank almost everyone you knew, would you have felt like you failed, or like you'd done exactly what your training told you to do? Tell me your honest answer in the comments below. I want to know whether you think the rules should bend for rank, or whether rank should have to prove itself like everyone else. If this story kept you hooked the way it did while I was putting it together, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because we post a brand new story just like this one every single week. Stories about the quiet, overlooked people who turn out to be exactly the person running the room. Tap the notification bell too, so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching all the way through. I'll see you in the next story.